So the first question here comes from Fatima, and they ask, is immersion enough to reach fluency? And they ask, is it true that if I immerse myself in active listening for a language I can understand, eventually I will be outputting naturally? And I think is a sort of a fundamental, almost philosophical question for a lot of people that, and a lot of nuance gets missed because it is seen as like a all or nothing question or a, You want to get into it?
My immediate answer is no, it will not work. So if you think about, people say, oh, babies immerse and they have an opportunity to just like learn through immersion and then they start speaking. But that doesn't take into account the fact that they are constantly having reinforcement and correction for understanding and also for speaking. And when they start speaking, they then get corrected for speaking. So there's no real model in human behavior for being able to do something purely through a passive exercise without any sort of interaction or feedback. So I think the thing that we really focus on is what is the feedback loop for learning.
Exactly.
Because if there is no feedback loop, then you can't really learn because you can't correct yourself. So if you're just sitting and watching TV, you're just listening to podcasts and you're not thinking about it, you're not looking up words, you're not checking to see what people mean, and you're not talking to somebody who can then like simplify or explain or show you with other materials, there is no feedback loop. There's no opportunity for you to know whether what you understood is correct or not. And without that feedback loop, your brain can't develop the predictive pathways in order to be able to understand something at a subconscious level and be able to use it at a subconscious level. So immersion by itself, without any support or tooling or human intervention, is I don't think there's any way that would yield the results you're looking for.
For understanding specifically, you can get a feedback loop with just like pretty simple, sort of almost subconscious activities of like, did I understand this? Yes or no? Am I understanding this? Am I getting it? But that doesn't exactly translate into output as well. Like that, which is their specific question is like, if you do a lot of active listening in things that you understand, will you just be able to output naturally? And you want to go ahead?
Yeah, I can take it. So there are some people who have demonstrated the ability to go straight from I can completely understand this to I can actually create full, complete sentences. And they're not perfect, but there are some people who have demonstrated a decent ability on the first attempt speaking. I know of at least 3 cases of people who were able to have full conversations the first time they tried to speak. That being said, the vast majority of the learners in our community have not demonstrated that ability. And it's not clear whether that's because they didn't have a good enough level or because their level was so good that their speaking ability, their understanding was so good that they could tell when they were saying things poorly. And in my case, when I speak, I have a little voice in my head that is constantly correcting what I'm saying.
A little Ethan.
Or what Krashen called the monitor, I believe is the monitor hypothesis. Where
sounds much fun though.
No. You get things popping out of your subconscious into your conscious brain ready to say, and then you have a little intellectual process that goes through and is like, is this actually the right thing to say? And when you have a very high level of comprehension and a very low level of output, that's a big blocker because you can hear every mistake that you're making. And it's an interruption in the ability to get some sort of flow. So one of the things that we focus on with new outputters is this level of comfort of being able to speak without that monitor interrupting you. And that takes 25 to 50 hours before you can get that level of comfort with it. And at that point, you're still not speaking perfectly. You're not 100% correct because you haven't actually focused on trying to correct all those things, but really just focusing in on that comfort in order to bypass that monitor that's constantly interrupting your speaking thought process.
Yeah, and there's a similar thing as well in the like actual comprehension and input side of things, where it does really help to use tools to challenge yourself and to double check meaning, to look at words, to understand things. That is a very common question in the Spanish server, because a lot of people use almost exclusively German Spanish and then find themselves with certain issues or slow progress because they're not necessarily getting that feedback loop in the way that they should. And they often will go to the things that are easy or artificially slower and don't actually make the jump to really pushing themselves to make progress again.
Yeah. And the hypothesis with dreaming Spanish isn't wrong. Like the comprehensible input that they provide is meant to provide a feedback loop, because when they say something, it corresponds to what's being visually shown. So you have an opportunity to evaluate whether you understood the thing based on the context that that thing is set in.
But that also assumes that you are doing the right sort of mental exercise to evaluate your understanding yourself.
Yes, there's an evaluation process. And it's also, I would argue, much slower. There's plenty of success cases with dreaming Spanish, but ones that are more pure, they take an enormous amount of time. You're talking like 8 hours a day of dreaming Spanish for a year.
It also seems to be very dependent on the person doing it. Some people have way more success than others. Cool. So hopefully that answers your question. Thank you.
In summary, no, but kind of.
Great answer. Great summary. Thank you.